Again, it's a great honor to have tonight's class sponsored by a very good friend, an old friend, Avi and Claudia Hulu. Shem should bless him. Great guy. He is dedicating tonight's class for the speedy recovery and refuah shlema for Yitzchak and Chanom Chana. Shakadosh Baruch Hu yishlach lo refuah shlema l'ramach evarav sagidav el narfana lo. El narfana lo, for ta nefesh, for ta guf, for vat evarim, hashta b'akadosh man kariv, v'nomar amen. Rabotai, I'm hoping that we get tremendous yata d'shmaya tonight to be zochet to the proper words, because when you come to Parashat Yitro, you're coming to nothing less than Matan Torah. And what's amazing to me is that over the years, we realized that it has nothing to do with how smart you are. It has nothing to do with how intelligent you were gifted or you were born with. It has to do with the ratson of a person, of how much do you want it. That's how much Borei Olam gives it to you. The attitude of a person, the heart and the outlook of a person has a lot to do with his hatzlacha and his personal Kabbalat Torah. And I wish they would have told us this years ago when we were kids. We would have worked on certain areas that would have made us a better and bigger klei kibul. A klei kibul. To be able to be mikabel so much more Torah in such a most beautiful, better keli. A keli that's going to be apropos for the holding of the old sweet wine of Torah. Tonight I want to talk about that attitude. And I want to talk about those kochot. I want to talk about this understanding of how much the ratson plays out in a person and his success in his personal Kabbalat Torah. It's amazing. You take a look in last week's parasha, right after Klal Yisrael walked out of Yam Suf, they come up to a place called Mara. Why was the place called bitter? What a name. Mara. You came to a place called bitter. How sweet it is, like they say in Brooklyn. How sweet it is. You came to a place called Mara. Bitter. Says the Torah. You want to know why the place was called Mara? Because the waters in this place were bitter waters. Like the Pasuk says, Vayilonu, the people started to complain to Moshe Rabbeinu, Manishte, what are we going to drink? Unbelievable. What was the problem? Because Vayavou Marata. Because they came to a place called Mara. V'lo yachlu l'shtot mayim mimara. They weren't able to drink the waters of Mara. Ki marim hem, because the waters were bitter. Al ken kara shema Mara. It's because of that the place was called Mara, because the waters were bitter. Says the Kotsker Rebbe, a Kotsker Vart. The Kotsker Rebbe was known for his unbelievable sharfkeit. He was so sharp. And you know, when you hear a Kotsker Vart, you know something big is about to come. When you hear a Vart from the great Kotsker Rebbe, Zechet Tzadik L'Bracha, you know that you're about to hear something unbelievably sharp and la'inyan. Says the Kotsker Rebbe, you read the Pasuk wrong. And this is the first tremendous lesson for the night and for Torah. Vayavo Marata. They came to bitterness. V'lo yachlu l'shtot mayim mimara. They couldn't drink the waters of the place called Mara. You want to know why? Says the Kotsker Rebbe, really, the waters are sweet. And the water is generally always sweet waters. But you want to know why they couldn't drink this water? Because v'lo yachlu l'shtot mayim mimara ki marim hem. Not the waters were bitter. They were bitter, says the Kotsker Rebbe. And because the people were bitter, they couldn't drink the waters even the most sweetest of waters. Ki marim hem, because they, the people, were bitter. If somebody's bitter, if their eyeglasses that they're wearing are dirty, foggy, they could walk out to a sunny day and it could look cloudy from the angle that they're looking to the world. What is your perspective on life? What eyeglasses are you looking through? Because that's the way you're going to see your world. You can give that person the sweetest of the sweet, the nicest of the nicest. He can walk out to the sunniest day of the year, and to him he'll give a krechs. It's cloudy. But my friend, take off your glasses. Wipe them down. Clean them up. You'll see that it's the most magnificent day. It's not the world that's cloudy. It's you. But people cannot see themselves. A person, Adam, Karav, Eitzel Atzmo, says the Gemara. We're too close to ourselves. We're too biased. We're too partial. And because of that, we could never see. We always think that the problem is on the outside. The problem's with this guy. The problem's with that thing. And because of that, says the Kotsker, an unbelievable word, the people were so bitter. The people were so bitter that even in spite of the fact that they were brought to the waters, and the waters were sweet, but still, the sweetest of water will taste bitter in the eyes of a mouth of bitter people. You want to know why? Ki marim hem, because the people were bitter. Al ken kara shema mara. That's why they called that place Mara. Because the people were bitter. And when you have a place of bitter people, the whole place gets affected. The whole place gets affected. The whole town gets affected. When you have a town with good people, the town has a nice look to it. When you have a place of, you can imagine what Sodom va'Amorah looked like. Because the people were the people of Sodom va'Amorah. Memela, Sodom va'Amorah was Sodom va'Amorah. And the people in Mitzrayim were people of Tum'ah. And Memela Mitzrayim was a Makom Tum'ah. So when you have a place that people are bitter, so you know what you call that place? Bitterness. Al ken kara shema mara. Because we have such an effect on the place that we're in, that even the sweetest waters in the mouth of someone bitter taste bitter. This is a tremendous lesson to how life is lived, depending on who's looking. Depending through whose perspective, who perceives, whose eyeglasses are you looking through, that's the life that you're going to live. Sometimes all you have to do is change your perspective. All you have to do sometimes is take off your glasses and clean your lenses and put them back on with a new perspective. And suddenly you start living a new life. A new cook. You have a new perspective. You perceive things differently with a more positive angle. Suddenly the world is a very different world. I always thought to myself, why by the waters was this lesson to be taught? This lesson of bitter people could be taught anywhere. And anyone who has dealt with bitter people in your life, you can teach this lesson when it comes to neighbors. You can teach this lesson when it comes to marriage. You can teach this lesson when it comes to any interaction of people. When someone is bitter, you know what you're in for. Why dafka by the waters? And the answer, Rabotai, is that when a person kneels down to water to drink, he sees his reflection. And when you have a fabitra mensch looking back at you, the waters can be the sweetest waters in the world. The minute you have somebody bitter looking back at you in reflection, the water is just as bitter. And this is a tremendous message. How many times we met people in life that they were carrying pain, certain things that they went through in life. And they were so bitter from other things. But every single little thing that came their way suddenly became a whole to-do of bitterness. There's always a neighbor on a block that this guy, you overhang his driveway an inch, he's coming out with a baseball bat. There are such people. Just a little something, it takes nothing to tick this person. And you ask yourself, what's up with this guy? Generally, if you start following the paper trail, you'll find out that something took place that hurt this person once upon a time, that made them such a bitter person on life, that any little thing that came along was just the makeu patish that ticked them off in the way that the bitterness just came flowing out. And that's why when you ever handle with bitter people, don't take it personal. They're bitter because they're bitter. And no matter who, what, where, or when crosses their path, they're going to get the same treatment. It's not you. They're going through stuff. And you have to learn how sometimes to spot that. Well, what did I do? What did I say? Relax. You didn't do, and you didn't say. You know how many times I have this conversation with my wife? What did I do? What did I say? How come they did? How could they say that? How could they come off that way? Stop. It's not about you. It's not about you. The person must be going through somebody. They must be going through something. This person's going through something. Ki marim hem. Al ken kara shema mara. I tried to explain this to my wife a few times. I'm being taped, so I'm very careful with my words now. I'd love to tell you a few mices, but I can't. But the bottom line is, the person's going through something. You know how many times people walk into shul, and they walk up to their friend, "Hey, how are you?" And the guy gets a half a word of an answer. Then you walk away saying, "What's up with this guy? Look at that. Chutzpah. He snubbed me. He snubbed me. Where did that come from? What's that about? Who does he think he is?" And you start concocting in your head. You start a Megillat Esther. What's this and that, and because and that, and shul, and I because my last daughter married and I didn't give him the bracha and an aliyah, and you start coming up with look at this Yetzer Hara. It's unbelievable how from a nothing he's able to make a something. And meanwhile, the whole thing is nothing with nothing. The guy had a bad morning. You happen to be the person that walked by him on a morning that he was having a tough time. He had an issue. He had an issue with his wife. He had an issue with his kids. He had an issue in business. He had an issue with his boss. And he walked into shul, and you happen to have been the lucky lemachel that walked by the guy at the time that he was cooking his issues. And when you, how are you? He looked at you like, no. It's not you. He might be going through stuff. And with the nicest, sweetest demeanor, if the person himself is going through difficulty and they are on a sour note, then everything is sour. The whole world is sour. Everything is sour. This is the famous Kotsker Rebbe's vart. And from here he teaches us how much the attitude of people plays a role in the quality of life you end up living. And he gives us chizuk. He tells us, if life seems to be bitter to you, maybe instead of pointing a finger to everybody else out there, stop for a minute and look into the water. Look into the mirror. Look into the reflection. Do you see that angry person looking back at you? That's the person that every single person that meets you ends up facing. You expect to live a happy life. You expect to be a social butterfly with such a face. That's your Shalom Aleichem to every single person that crosses your path. You expect life to be what? Peachy, beautiful, rainbows and sunshine? If you would walk by a face like that every day, you'd run! And you expect everybody else to fall in line? Says the Kotsker Rebbe, look in the mirror. This lesson was taught by the water because there was the reflection to show you it's not the water that's bitter, it's you that's bitter. Stop for a minute, take off your own eyeglasses, clean your lenses. Maybe you're looking at bitter glasses. Maybe you're looking at the world through bitter lenses. Change your lenses. Change your perspective. Change your mindset. Start looking for the positive in the world. Start looking for the positive in people. Suddenly you'll start seeing that life is beautiful. Life is be'etzem beautiful. You just have to see it. This is the Pashup Pshat. Not the Pashup Pshat, but this is the Pshat of the Kotsker Rebbe in this incredible pasuk of Kimarim Hem. I want to say a little bit of a drush here. Because right after Klal Yisrael could not drink from the waters in Marah, either because the water was bitter or because they were bitter, but listen to what happened. Vayitzak el Hashem, they cried out to Hashem, we need something to drink. Manishteh, what are we going to drink? Vayoreu Hashem etz, vayashlech al hamayim. Hashem, He showed Moshe Rabbeinu a certain tree. Moshe Rabbeinu took this tree and he threw it into the water. Vayimteku hamayim, and the waters became sweet. Sham sam lo v'choku mishpat v'sham nisahu. Says Chazal, what etz was this? Was it a sugar cane? What etz was this? This was the etz chaim hila mahazikim ba. Chok u'mishpat v'sham nisahu. This was the etz of the Torah itself, the etz chaim. The etz chaim hila mahazikim ba. This was the Torah itself. Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu, no matter how bitter the waters are, and according to the Kotsker, no matter how bitter the people are, you give them a little Torah, and suddenly they become sweet. How many times have I tried to explain to people that the way to heal is through the Torah itself? How many times? I know a certain somebody that's related to me. They were going through a bankruptcy that was vicious. They were mamish, losing everything. Everything. And he was from a bunch of brothers. And all the brothers were losing everything. The bank was coming for everything. They were coming for their houses. They were coming for their everything. I don't want to go into detail. I don't want to give away. For everything. And this particular guy that I spoke to, his brothers almost lost their minds through the entire bankruptcy. Mamash, they lost everything. And this brother not only stayed sane, but he was the only one that remained calm and collective. And because of that, he was the one that the brothers appointed to negotiate with the bank, because he was the only one that was able to keep his head, his composure, and his on. And I asked him, what was your secret? Everybody else fell apart. How come not you? I thought he was going to give me a big answer. Emunah bitachon. I thought he was going to give me something, He said to me, right when I started the bankruptcy, I began Daf Yomi. He says, that Daf carried me through the most difficult time of my life. And it held me, and it kept me going, and it was mechazek me, and it gave me a strength to get through the impossible while keeping sweet. Rabotai, I want you to hear something. When you sit down to learn a blot Gemara, never forget, it's not you learning the Gemara, it's the Gemara going through you. The Torah refines you. The Torah cleans you. The Torah is something that's machshir a person. You know, you have a pot, and the pot's treif. By mistake, you had a fleshik pot, a meat pot. By mistake, somebody took a spoon that was used that day, hot, for dairy, and they mixed up the meat pot. Oh, what are we going to do now? The pot needs to be koshered. How do you kosher the pot? You kosher the pot with fire. The way it went in with fire is the way it goes out with fire. So we're machshir the pot. That, says Reb Chaim Volozhiner, is the Esh HaTorah. Torah is Esh. It's Esh, it's fire. When a person learns Torah, he's machshir the pot. The pot is treif. The pot's treif. The only way to get the bliot of tarfut out of our heads, out of our hearts, out of our bones, is only one way. It's al yedei hagala. Al yedei be machshir the pot with fire. And that's the Esh HaTorah. When a person learns Torah, it changes his essence. And I want you to know this. There is no other element that changes the essence of anything like fire. You could take a piano, a baby grand. You could drop it off the top of the Empire State Building. Yes, when it gets to the bottom, it'll smash. But it's still a smashed baby grand piano. You take the baby grand piano and you drop it off an ocean liner, a ship in the middle of the ocean, and it falls into the ocean and it sinks to the bottom. And now it's waterlogged. But it's still a waterlogged baby grand piano. But you take that baby grand piano and you drop it into a fire, and suddenly it's firewood. No more baby grand piano. Esh is the one element that Hashem created, that was brought into the world, that takes whatever comes in contact with it and changes its essence legamre. Esh HaTorah. That's the difference. That's the difference between Torah and everything else. It's unbelievable. And this is a concept that we learn from this story of Mara. When Moshe Rabbeinu took the etz and threw it into the bitter waters, or he threw it in the water and got the bitter people to drink it. Either way, it's the same idea. Whether the Kotsker or the regular pshat. But he took the etz of Torah, etz chaim hi, la mahazikimba, and he threw it into the water. It isn't pshat that he took a bitter water and added sugar. And now the bitterness of the water was masqueraded and camouflaged with the sweetness of the etz. No, that's not what happened here. But rather, when the etz went into the water of bitterness, it changed the etzem essence of the waters. That now the waters were no longer bitter waters. Now the waters were sweet. Exactly. And this is the famous mashal that they always told us in yeshiva. They always told us that when you have a coffee, and we've spoken about this in the past, the coffee itself is bitter. Super bitter. Mamash. Don't try that at home. Bitter. And you put the coffee inside the cup. And then you pour in the boiling hot water. And right now you have a straight up black coffee. And for the non-coffee connoisseur, that's bitter. So you take a little sugar and you add it to the coffee. What happens now? Is it the pshat now that the coffee granules become sweet granules? No. The coffee still is bitter even after you add the sugar. But you added enough sugar that the sugar is able to camouflage the bitterness of the coffee, and now together they kind of make shalom between the bitterness of the coffee and the super sweetness of the sugar, that together they balance each other's tastes out to make them drinkable. That's the essence of a cup of coffee. Says the Torah, but that's not Torah. That's not the story of the waters of Mara. The waters of Mara were bitter like coffee. And when Moshe Rabbeinu took the etz, which stands for the Torah itself, and he threw it into the water, it's not pshat he added sugar. And now the balance of the two elements come out to be something palatable. No! When you add Torah into the bitterness, the Torah changes the essence of the waters themselves, where now the waters are not bitter waters anymore. The water becomes a sweet water. That's what happens when someone learns Torah. I've watched this 1,000 times. People with all different types of personality traits, all different types of personality shortcomings. They have all different types of problems. Suddenly they start learning, and the Torah refines them. The Torah changes their essence. The Torah makes them a different person. It's not that they're still the same rotten guy with a little bit more sweetness, so now they're not that bad. No, it changes them that they're now someone else, a completely different person. Because Torah is fire. And anything that comes in contact with fire, the entire essence changes to the core, to the mikor. It's a different person. And that's what happened by Mara. And this was the story that Torah teaches us. How could you go to Parashat Yitro and talk about Matan Torah if you didn't speak about the story of the waters of Mara? Because what are you getting? What was the matana? What was the Torah given to us? It was an elixir of life. It was the great healer of Klal Yisrael. It made us who we are. If not for the Torah, we would be behemoth. If not for the Torah, you know what we would be? Resh Lakish, Bar Lakisha. He was the head of the bandits. A little bit of Torah, and he became a Gadol Hador. We're all bandits. We're banditim until we got a little drink of Torah. Every one of us. And anyone who denies it, they don't know what they're talking about. Mechila for talking this strong. But that's why we need to remember that we need that daily vitamin, that daily antibiotic that kills the virus, the virus of a mensch. You need it. You need it because the pot needs to be machshir. You need it because the mensch needs to be refined. It refines the midot. It refines the whole makeup of a person. My brother, Rabbi Yossi ben Shushan, he used to run a yeshiva in Yerushalayim. They nicknamed the yeshiva Last Stop. Now that's a powerful name for a yeshiva. The last stop. Pshuto kemashmao. These were boys that the world gave up their hopes on. These were boys that were already frequented in the rehabs of America, been there, done that, in and out quite a few times, and now no hope left. What are they going to do with him? Where are they going to send him? So they would send these guys to Last Stop. This is the Last Stop. What's amazing is, is that when my brother Yossi got his hands on these guys in Eretz Yisrael, he had a mishunadika, unbelievable success rate with the guys that the world gave up hope on. The guys that they already wrote off as a complete loss. And he had unbelievable success with these guys, turning them around to be Bnei Torah, not just Bnei Torah, powerhouse guys. Guys that actually can go out and change and do for Klal Yisrael like nobody else. Powerhouse guys, super guys. And I used to ask Yossi, I used to go many times over the years on vacation to the yeshiva. I said, Yossi, what is the secret? How do you turn these guys around? I know what he was going to say, but I wanted to hear it. And he says to me, Duvi, you got to believe in your product. We have a product that nobody else has. He says, do you know why I have an 87% success rate with these boys when the biggest rehab centers in the United States are running at a 22% success rate? I have something that they only wish they had. I have the Torah HaKadosha. He says, you know what I do with these guys? You know what I do with these guys? He says, I sit them down with a Rebbe, a 1-on-2, a 1-on-3. That's it. That's like the biggest chabura in the place. Many different Rebbes that learned with either 1-on-2 boys or 1-on-3 boys. And he would give these boys the love of learning, and they would learn a line at a time, and they were not in a rush, and there were no prokim to be finished, and there were no mesechtot to be had, and there was no peer pressure, and there was no yeshiva competition pressure. It was you and your love for learning. You want to hear the line again? I'll tell it to you again. I'll tell it to you 100 times. Does it make sense to you? What's your input? What do you think about that? And these boys would start going down the page, one line at a time, with a dedicated Rebbe that's literally focusing directly on him and another guy. He says, you have to believe in your product. When the Torah went into these guys, it was better than any medicine in the world. It was better than any program in the world. It was better than any antibiotic or any fix closer or anything possible. It went in and it cleaned out their insides. And it was hofech the mensch to be somebody else. Somebody refined. And suddenly the guy was able to have more self-control, more discipline, less Wildkeit, more midot. Somebody finally was at home to talk to. Little by little by little. He says at the end of the Zman of these guys learning in a makeshift Bet Midrash program, they saw more strides for growth and rehabilitation than they've ever seen in the biggest rehab centers of the biggest professionals in the United States of America. Because they threw the etz into the mayim. Vayimteku hamayim. The waters became sweet. You got to believe in your product. And you got to be able to show the person you're learning with that it really is sweet. One of the biggest challenges today is that a Rebbe walks into a classroom and he has expectations that the boy already must buy in to the idea. We're living in a new generation, Rabotai, listen to me. This is a generation that you need to earn a certain trust by them. They're very delicate neshamot. They don't trust too quickly. They don't respect too quickly. They're very delicate in nature. Once upon a time, you guys remember, when a Rebbe would walk into a classroom, it was a given. It was a given. Everybody would stand up immediately, just like that. It was a given. Now, the boys stand up. But you know how many times I've heard from boys, maybe not in all communities, maybe in certain communities, but like, do I really got to get up for him? We sit down to learn the Gemara, is this really what I should be working on? They need to see that it's sweet by you. They need to see how sweet it is in order to buy into it. Let me explain to you where I'm coming from. They held a wine tasting test out in the vineyards in France, where some of the best wines came from. And they invited a group of wine connoisseurs to come out for this wine tasting gala. And there they brought everybody into this magnificent room. And on the table all there were empty glasses set up by each chair. The people came in and sat down. And then the host would walk out into the room in a tuxedo, holding a bottle of wine wrapped in a white handkerchief. He would walk in with this smile of victory on his face. And he would say, ladies and gentlemen, I am about to unveil this year's award-winning Bordeaux. And ladies and gentlemen, don't be quick to enjoy the bouquet of roses that are going to emanate from the smell when you only swish the wine in your glass and take in the aroma and the fragrance. And only then it'll compel you to want to take that first sip, where at that point you'll throw it back and enjoy the better things that this world has to offer. You think the guy is talking about this trip to... No, he's talking about a cup of wine. But this is their trip. And he opens up the bottle. This is the unveiling. He opens up the bottle. And he has the bottle wrapped in that white cloth. And he pours it, mamish, like he's holding an infant. He pours it, he pours it. And everyone's quiet, like no one, this is the moment. No one's talking. It's like don't be mafsik, you know what I mean? And he's pouring. And everyone just hears the sound of the wine hitting the glass. He fills it up only a quart away. Too much good at one time is no good. Just a reveat. And then he goes around the room and he smiles at each person as if he's about to hand them $1 million. And he pours it to that person, and then the next, and then the next, and the next. And he comes around and he puts it down and he picks up the wine and he swishes it around the cup. And he's looking at everybody and everyone is shaking each other's heads because nobody wants to, not be the, So everyone's shaking each other's head to the other guy. Yeah. Oh, this was a good year. Oh, this was a good year. Oh, this was a good year. This was a good year. Yeah. And they're waiting for the cue. And then the head Meshugana takes the bell. And this is the moment where he rings the bell. And that is the green light for everyone to raise their goblets, raise their glasses, and take the taste of this year's first harvest. And they take it back, and you hear, mamish, the people gives unbelievable. Everybody on the table is oohing and eyeing. And there's one guy who's a novice, who came along only because someone schlepped him. And he's not a wine connoisseur. And he doesn't know what this is about. And he came along because his brother-in-law told him, you gotta come. And he schlepped them out to Paris, and it was one of the things to do, and he had nothing to do that day. So he came along Memela. So he throws it back with everybody else, and just then, he sprays the room. The guy with the bell faints. They had to revive him. He looked at the guy like a kaifer. You're a kaifer. You're a kaifer. You're apikairis. You spit out the wine. And the guy says, I'm sorry, it was so bitter to me. You just spit out $300 in that one mouthful. He says, but it was bitter to me. You know, you come to a kid and you pour him the wine and you tell him, this is the Torah and it's so sweet. But this is his first swig. This is his first time learning. If you don't have the ability to teach him what it means to develop a taste for the sweetness of learning, then to him it still doesn't taste yet what you are describing to him, what he's expecting. So we have to make it sweet. A good Rebbe knows how to give over a sugya with a chlorkite. A great Rebbe knows how to give over a sugya with sweetness and brings it alive. Brings it alive. And that's what we need today. We need the sweetness. But the minute that learning goes in, and that they take another sip, and the Rebbe tells the boys, listen, it's bitter in the beginning. It's bitter in the beginning. It's not easy. It's Aramaic. It's a language we don't understand. There's a shaklavataria, there's a kasha, there's a teretz, there's a stira, there's a brisa, there's a proof, there's a reminhu, and the boy is like overwhelmed. He says, but don't worry. In the beginning, you take a drink. It's a little bit bitter, but wait, take another drink, and another drink. And the more you start to drink, the more sweet it becomes. And as it comes into us, we realize that the reason why it was bitter is not because the wine is bitter, is because our taste buds, were not yet trained to appreciate the good things of life. You have a guy that his mouth is used to sour sticks and candy, and you hand him $1,000 bottle of wine, to him it's going to taste like turpentine. Is the problem with the bottle of wine, or is the problem with the taste buds of the person? You didn't develop yet your taste buds to appreciate something this magnificent. Take another drink, you'll get there. But you'll get there. And we have to give them the confidence that they'll get there. So that's what Taka happened with my brother. He took the guys that were what anyone would think would be able to be helped, and he gave them the drink of life. And boy, have you seen a difference. Over the years, I've sent so many guys to Eretz Yisrael. I've seen them go, one person, and come back somebody else. How many times I've sent guys to Israel to learn the Avir, and the fact that they're in a place that there's no distractions. Over here, there's so much distractions. It's impossible, especially a boy that age. But they go there. There's less distractions. They're in a yeshiva that's learning. They have great rebbes, and they learn for 6 months. They come back into shul. 6 months later, they walk in. You look at the kid's face. He looks like somebody else. It changes the essence of the person. This was the zechut that we had by getting the Torah. It's an amazing idea. But these are the mayim mitukim. These are the sweet waters that changes a person's essence to be somebody that they really hoped to be. It's only through the learning. That's the way we change people. We change people through Torah. You could talk to them, you can give them musar, you can give them shmuzin, but that only brings them in. But the real change only happens with the real learning. With the real learning. The real learning. It's amazing. I was by an event not too long ago. I told this to Chesky. And the Kotsker Rebbe was there, his son. And he said over in the name of his great-grandfather, that he said over in the name of a big tzaddik from Europe, that the Baldover, the Yetzer Hara, once came to him. And he said to him, I will give you all the ma'alot of Kedusha you're looking for. I'll give you Gadlut, I'll give you Ruach HaKodesh, I'll give you Mamash, the highest of the high. I'm asking you just one thing. Don't teach Gemara to your students. You can teach whatever you want. Teach them Musar, teach them Halakha. This is what he told them. I heard it with my own ears. I was by the event when he said this. He said, teach them whatever you want. Anything. Teach them this, teach them that, teach them anything. But don't teach them Gemara. He says, because that is the one thing that literally changes a person inside out. And that the Yetzer Hara can't deal with. And this tzaddik said, I learned from that conversation with the Baldover that the biggest thing that's saving us today in these generations of Nisyonot is a blot Gemara, is a Gemara learning. And that's why in the mornings when we have our Kolel, that we sit with our Chevra from 9 to 11, we actually added now a Gemara segment where we start at 9 o'clock Gemara Be'iyun. We started Berachot, Gemara Be'iyun, and we learn for half hour, 40 minutes. And then we go on to the Bet HaLevi and we learn the Ma'amarei Bitachon. And then after that, we go to the Shmirat HaLashon. Because without that Gemara, we are not complete. These are the sweet waters that change people for good. But you have to want it. You have to really want it. And the more you want it, the more you matzliach. I know I'm over my time. We started a little late today. I want to tell you a ma'aseh that happened with me many years ago. It's an embarrassing story. It's an embarrassing story. But sometimes in life, you got to take the bullet for the better of the tzibur. But I want you to hear this ma'aseh. I was in 10th grade in the Murray Yeshiva. And in those days, I did not yet taste the sweetness of learning. I was still starting out. And I had a lot of craziness in my head. And because of that, when it came time for share, I had a great Rebbe. And the Rebbe, Mamash, was trying his best to get us to learn the entire Perek. I remember it was Masechet Baba Kama. It was Perek HaMeniach. He was trying to get us to finish the Perek. And my head wasn't into it. I was a 10th grader. My head was an American boy. And all the Mishigasan of the world. And I wasn't into it. Although my heart wanted it. But my head just wasn't into it. And I'm telling you, I remember one time, my Rebbe gave us a test. And it was a test on the entire Perek of 10, 12 blot. I didn't know one page. I wrote my name on the top of the test. I waited 10 minutes, and I handed the test in blank. Woo! Wow! Did I get a Mishaberach? Oh, wow. Wow. Did my Rebbe blow me to pieces? To pieces. Very strong words he used. Very strong words. Just wasn't holding. Nobody gave me that sweetness yet. I didn't see it yet. 10th grade. Tough year. Later on that year, my tests were forget about it. My learning was so-so. One day, my Rebbe comes in and says, guys, a big tzaddik from Eretz Yisrael just came to America. His name is Rav Don Segal, Shalita. He says he has the hadrat panim of a malach. He says, I want you to come tonight. I arranged that the class will be able to sit by him and get berachot in somebody's house tonight. I will insist that everybody comes. Okay. So that night, everybody came to somebody's house in Borough Park where Rav Don Segal was staying. And we all came into this guy's living room. And we were sitting around in the couch, all 22 of us. And you know, high school boys, horsing around, playing around, you know, cheppering this kid, flicking this kid's ear, you know what I mean? They were playing around. It was a big joke. It was a big game to everybody. No one had a clue who was in the next room. I don't know if you've ever seen Rav Don Segal. He has a fire on his face. And his eyes, mamish, Malach Hashem. We had no clue what we were about to walk into. No clue. All right. So the Rebbe comes out of the room. It was an office. And he says, okay guys, settle down. Line up. And we'll see who's going to go in first. And each guy, you'll have a minute or two by Rav Don. You'll tell him a few things. He'll give you a bracha and you're out. So we're all kidding around. We lined up. Everyone's playing with the other guy, fighting with the other guy, pushing the high school boys. The first guy goes in. Everyone's laughing. He goes in. They close the door. 2 minutes. 5 minutes. I'm looking at my friend. What's going on in there? What's going on in there? 10 minutes. What's going on in there? The kid walks out. He has tears. His face is white like he saw a ghost. And he just walks right out of the house and doesn't say a word to anybody online. I looked at my friend and said, oh boy, we're in for it. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what I signed up for. I looked at my friend, I said, oh, what happened to him? And that kid was a tough kid. What happened? My Rebbe comes out with a smile. Who's next? I said, oh, that minute, I'm telling you, it was like flies. That line scattered so fast. That line, you had guys hanging by the chandeliers. But nobody was by that door. No, Rebbe, he'll go. No, I needed a little time. No. I said to myself, I'm going next. I walked up, I said, Rebbe, I'm next. But Shushan, you want to? I said, yeah. I said, okay. He opens the door. I walk inside. And there, behind the desk, was Rav Don Segal, Shalita. And there was a light on his desk that was shining on his face. And the room was black, was dark. And all I saw was the light on his face. And he was looking down. He looked up for a second at me. And for that second, I froze. I literally felt that he looked straight through me. My knees were knocking. I don't know, something came over me. A certain feeling of ra'ada. I started to tzither a little bit. And I was standing in the presence of a tzaddik that you can feel his dalet amot. And he looked at me and smiled. And he said to me, what do you want a bracha for? Now my Rebbe was standing there in the corner with a smirk. He was smirking. I looked at him. And I am telling you, Rabotai, I don't know where these words came from. I don't know. This must have been Zchut Avot. I don't know where the words came from. I said to him, I want a beracha to be zoche, to be to'em, the tam ha'amiti v'ha'mitikut shel Torah. Rav Don opens his eyes like this and looks at me dead ahead. My Rebbe almost fainted in the side of the room. And he said to me, come ahead. I walked up to him. He says, come on. I come around. He takes my hand. And he's holding my hand. I don't know. Something at that minute came on. I started crying. But such a cry, such a cry from the neshama. My neshama was crying. And I said it again. I said, Harav, ich will des Chus zu toim sein. The mitikut von Torah. And he looks at me. And mitzvah Hashem, Ani noten lecha, he said to me in Hebrew, Ani noten lecha beracha, shetizke lit'om et hatam ha'amiti va'amitikut shel Torah. And I said, Amen. And he wouldn't let go of my hand. I was crying, and he started crying. And my Rebbe is sitting there looking at the two of us. I mean, here's the guy who we thought was the Eisvarf in his class. The guy that handed in the test with his name on top. That was the last thing he expected. The last thing he expected. And Rav Don wouldn't let go of my hand. And he said to me, I said, David Ben Shushan. He says, Ben Shushan. He said again, Ani noten lecha beracha. And he gave me the bracha again. And he gave me the bracha again. And then I kissed his hand like a good Sfaradi boy. And I walked out. I came out with tears. The class saw. The second guy! Lamb to the slaughter. Rav Don is 2 for 2. Nobody wanted to go in after that. And frankly, I don't know what happened after that. I walked right out the door. I got a car service. You remember the days of car services? I got a car service on 18th Avenue somewhere, and I went back home. Something happened to me that night. I came in the next day, and my Rebbe called me outside. He said, David, come outside. I came outside. He looks at me, and he smacks me in the face. And he says, if I would have known that you had that neshama, I would have given you not a moment's rest from the beginning of the year till now. When you walked out of that room, Rav Don screamed at me, why aren't you handling with this boy? Why are you letting him just hazoi sit in the back of the room and just, we call it the peace treaty. Rabbi, I won't bother you, you don't bother me. Shama is up. Why? He says, I got from Rav Don last night a yelling. I got from Rav Don last night a big tochecha. He says, that's it. Now I know who you really are. Now we're going to start learning together. I don't know, something went on in my head. I can't tell you I had such a great year of learning at the end of that year. Don't think this is one of those big happy ending, no. It took me another year or two till I really started to get into learning until about 12th grade. And then finally I went out to Edison and I met my first Rebbe, my first real Rebbe of learning, Rebbe Shachar. My Rebbe, who he was the one who gave me this unbelievable time and fire for Torah. Rebbe was unbelievable. I used to learn with him seconds while the rest of the yeshiva was doing bikiut. I would go into his office and we would review the shir of the morning together and we would knock it out of the park. But listen to the end of this story. Years later, I'm talking about almost, at least 7-8 years later. I make it to Yeshivat Itri, which is a story in itself. And I'm learning in Yerushalayim, in an Israeli yeshiva. And I'm already there 3 years as Bachur. And I'm already learning in the morning, or Simcha Shif, my Rebbe, morning after morning, B'Havruta. And I'll never forget, somebody walks in and they put a paper up on the board where they put the Mar Mekomot for the Sher Klali. And the paper is always this announcement. And everyone, the minute the guy tacks it up there, everyone comes running up to look, what's the nice, what's the new thing? And it says over there, Yitkayem, Dirashat Musar, Me'et. And then I look at the name, Hamashgiach Hanoda Beklal Yisrael, Rav Don Segal Shlita. I said, whoa, he's coming here to Itri. Wow, I'm going to get to see him again. How could I forget him from 10th grade, 7-8 years earlier? Rav Don came in. And now, again with the Malach Hashem look, he gets up, and that Rosh Chodesh, I remember, he gave such a shmooze, Rosh Chodesh Av, he gave such a shmooze on what it means to learn, and what it means, the destruction of a Bet HaMikdash, and how al Yedei Torah we could be Mekayem the Bet HaMikdash. What a shmooze. And right when he finished, I was sitting somewhere in the back alongside the chairs. He comes down from the podium. He starts walking down the aisle of the Bet Midrash. And as he walks by, everyone jumps on top of him to give him a Shalom Aleichem, to shake his hand. And as he's walking by, he stops. He turns around and looks me dead in the eye. And he says, "No. Was macht der Ben Shusha?" 8 years later. Ta'amta mashu. I'll never forget those words. Ta'amta mashu. Ta'amta. And he didn't wait for an answer, he just smiled. Ta'amta mashu. Ay, 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 ay. What does it mean to learn? What does it mean to have a Rebbe? What does it mean to taste the bitter waters that become so sweet that once you taste the sweet waters of Torah, everything else in the world becomes artificial flavoring? My father told me that he used to hear from Rav Shmuel Birnbaum, Zechet Tzadik Lebracha, he says, anybody that touches the doorknob of the yeshiva, that's it. That's it. Once he touches that doorknob, there's no going back. You tasted what Torah is, everything else is Hevel Havalim. There's nothing out there that will give you a Sipuk HaChaim like learning. Nothing. There are quick fixes. They come, they go. But sometimes they'll leave you even more empty than you started with. This is the only thing that fills up a person with such a simcha. And it gives us such a purpose and such an enjoyment, refines us, it cleans us. I remember years ago, I got a phone call one night. A lady called me, she said, "Rabbi, thank you." I said, "Thank you for what?" She says, "Today my husband came home from work. I knew from the slamming of the front door what type of day he had. He comes inside. He's mumbling under his breath. He's already angry at the world. He sits down. He looks at me. Where's my supper? What does a guy have to do to eat around here? Can't you have the food waiting for me? I don't work hard enough." Kimarim hem. Remember that pasuk. Remember the Kotsker. Kimarim hem. Not the waters, the people. She says, "I ran, I grabbed the stuff off the stove, I gave him a 10-course meal. Blah, this is bland. Blah, this needs salt. Blah, she burnt this again. You're just like your mother. She burnt this again. Just like your mother." She says, and he wasn't done yet. After she wiped off the table, and she wiped me off the table with it, he goes upstairs, he starts yelling at the kids, "What are you running around? You're wild. You're making noise. You're giving me a headache. Everyone's going to bed too early tonight. Everyone's going to bed early. I hear one word out of somebody, you're going to get punished." She says, "Who is this guy? Who is this guy? Who is this guy?" She says, "You know what I did, Rabbi? I walked up to my husband, I said to him, do me a favor. Go to Rabbi Duvi. Go learn. Just get out. Just go. You're killing me, you're killing the kids. Just get out. Just go learn. Go to night Seder. Go learn. I threw him out of the house. She told me I threw him out of the house. She says, Rabbi, I don't know what you did. The guy just came home 20 minutes ago from night Seder. He walked into the house. He closed the door quietly. He took off his shoes. He didn't want to dirty the floors. He came upstairs and he apologized to me. He went into the rooms of the kids and he kissed each kid as they were sleeping in their beds. He came back inside. He sat down and asked me if he can make me a tea. She says, Rabbi, what did you do to my husband? I sent you a lion and you sent me back a puppy. What did you do? Tell me what you did. Where's my husband? This isn't the same guy. And I said to her, it had nothing to do with me. It was the learning. When your husband came in, he sat down and he learned. And that learning put him to a different place. And suddenly he came in, kimarim hem. He came in a bitter mensch. He became in a bitter person, a person with problems, a person with issues, a person that felt like the whole world was coming down on his head. I'll tell you another pshat in kimarim hem. You give a kid a phone, and you don't put a filter on that phone. And this kid is touring the back streets of Thailand on that phone with one press of a button. And he's going through the schmutz of Europe on that phone. And he's going through the chat rooms with the disgusting garbage of the streets of America. And then you expect that kid to learn? How come my son doesn't know Torah? How could he? You know what you stuffed his head up with? With such mirirut. How could you expect the mitikut of Torah to happen in this kid? Get rid of the garbage and start giving him a taste of what really is real. This guy came to night Seder, he was angry at the world. Kimarim hem. This went wrong and he lost the account. And he got fired from this, and his boss, and this, everything was bitter. He lets it out on everybody at home, and then he comes to night Seder, and suddenly he starts to learn. And what happens? They threw the etz into the bitter waters, and it changed his essence legamre. And he became a different person 2 hours later, and he became sweet. And he goes home now to a wife, and he asks for forgiveness. I tell the wives, I said, don't do it for me, and then don't even do it for God. Do it for yourself, for your own marriage. You want a husband? You want someone who's going to respect you? Someone who's going to be loyal to you? Someone who's going to have midot? A good father to your children? You better make sure you're sending him out to learning. You better make sure that he's drinking from the right waters that will refine him and clean him and be machshir the keli. You better make sure. Because that's the only way in this time, in these days, that we can actually aspire to become something, both for our family and for ourselves. It's only al yedei the Torah learning. This is what's machshir a mensch. It's unbelievable. But it's how much do you want it? It's about the person that puts his back to the world and goes into learning and remembers that this is the ikar. We should be zocheh that the Torah should not only be learnt by us, but it should go through us. And it should constantly clean us. In these days of Shobabim, we should zocheh the beracha of the great Rav Don Segal. To be zocheh, to be to'em, the ta'am ha'amiti, v'amitikut shel Torah, on a personal Matan Torah. Thank you for listening.